Your home is more than the sum of its parts, and creating a truly extraordinary space is about more than picking the perfect products. That's why the experts at Ferguson Bath, Kitchen, and Lighting Gallery are here to help you throughout the entire process to create a home that's as unique as you are. Bring your vision to us.
Schedule your showroom consultation and see more from brands like Monogram at build.com/Ferguson.
This podcast of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs is sponsored by AAA Heating and Air.
The premier HVAC company in the Midlands is growing. Are you a top HVAC technician?
AAA Heating and Air is looking for dedicated applicants to fill their fast-growing service department with top-notch HVAC technicians.
If you're the best, then they want you. If you're ready to stop working and start a career, you can earn up to $100,000 plus a year at AAA Heating and Air.
Quality candidates will have at least 2 years experience and a good driving record. Benefits include top industry salaries, commission on service and unit sales, set call limits, company-provided take-home vehicle and gas card, company-provided cell phone and tablet, health, dental, and vision benefits, 401k retirement plan with company match, and scaled PTO based on length of service.
Contact Roy and Dana Finley at 803-677-1500 or check out their job postings on Facebook or ZipRecruiter.
AAA Air when you need us. AAA Heating and Air.
11 o'clock, welcome in Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West and Chris, we've been broadcasting out here at Gold Line Framing, 511 12th Street in West Columbia all morning long. Still got another hour to go. Josh is out here. He has got tickets for tonight's game between Carolina and Clemson. Women's basketball. Got Carowinds passes to give away. Got T-shirts. Come by and see us again, 511 12th Street in West Columbia, which is the start of a very busy day here on the game, as Terry will be out at the Nest broadcasting from 12 until 3 on Gadsden Street, and then Jay and Terry will be out at Todd and Moore from 3 until 6. And speaking of being on location, Monday we'll be out at Firehouse Subs once again. This time, the Main Street location, literally like a stone's throw from our studio.
Yep, 633 Main Street, right on USC campus, right across from, guys, where I used to live at USC, and the now demolished.
Ooh, we're going to get some Chris stories while we're over there.
We may. I mean, every time I walk over there, I get a little bit, it's nostalgic. But we're going to enjoy ourselves some Firehouse Subs. And if you've not had the new turkey Thanksgiving sub, you need to check it out. Thanksgiving right around the corner. This is a limited time offering. It's actually my understanding that Columbia is one of the select markets in the entire country that has this thing. Carved turkey, cranberry, mayo, dressing, which is what we call it in the South. You can get it at firehousesubs.com using the Rapid Rescue. It'll be ready when you go into Firehouse Subs to pick it up, or available on the app. You can earn yourself some rewards either way by linking a loyalty account. Earn yourself some rewards to get some free Firehouse Subs in the future. Looking forward to being there on Monday.
Yep, absolutely excited to be out there. Again, coming up on Monday for the holiday week as we get you set for South Carolina and Clemson. But obviously our focus first is on Kentucky this upcoming weekend. Yesterday we heard from the coordinators. Dow Loggins was asked about Spencer Rattler and how much he spread the ball around this past weekend to against Vanderbilt, getting the ball to 10 different receivers, and if that's something that can be sustained going forward. Here's what Loggins had to say.
Both. I think it's a great question. I didn't know that, and it's kind of like what we just talked about, like everyone playing a role. It keeps morale high when guys are appreciated, and everyone wants to touch the ball, and there's only one ball, so it's hard sometimes to spread it around, especially when you have Xavier Legette and you want to get him the ball. But it's a combination of guys getting better through the months of November and December and continue to get better through the season. And guys, when their numbers called, going in and making plays, Spencer getting through progressions. And some of those times, like those are like he's getting to 3 or 4 in progression to get backside. I mean, you guys know that Legette most of the time is going to be 1 or 2 in a progression. Sometimes we use him as a decoy, but not very often. So when he's getting backside to things and guys are making plays for him, and the other thing he does is it gives Spencer confidence to get to a progression where he doesn't have to be fixated on throwing the ball to Legette all the time. And the Knicks and Tyshons and Luke Doty and AB and Peyton Manning played 16, 17 snaps for us, and I'm sure I'm going to miss somebody. That's why I don't like individualizing people like Josh and JD played, and Nick Elskis played, and Connor Cox played. Like, all those guys, like, it's just good for them to play, and it's good for this time of the season for everyone to play. It keeps morale high. They continue. The only way to get better is to go play football. Like, you get better from practice, but you got to go do it on Saturdays, and that experience helps. And then making plays in games helps as much as anything.
I think he was, the question was asked in the way, is that just, the defense that you're going up against, which Vanderbilt obviously had a defense that struggled, or is it, Spencer being so good at going through his progressions and having so many options? And I think Tyshawn Russell even had a drop on Saturday, so that could have even been an 11th receiver. But, definitely good to see so many guys getting touches this past weekend. Maybe don't have this many this weekend against Kentucky, but I'm sure he'll still be able to spread the ball around pretty well.
Yeah, and I think against this Kentucky heavily zone-based defense, it's a little bit different than facing like a man team, I think. So the progressions are a little bit different, and I think the way you attack it is a little bit different. So we'll see. I think they'll obviously try to continue to involve people like Josh Simon, in the passing game. They were really able to attack Vandy with their running backs in the passing game as well, it felt like. But we know there was the one big play where DJ Braswell got kind of just lost, in coverage there. So you don't necessarily maybe see that as much with Kentucky. But that's been just some of that, I think, is just Rattler being Rattler. Like, he has gotten so good at working through those progressions at light speed and then still being able to physically deliver the football. Like, I think for some quarterbacks there's a disconnect, especially early in their career. They may be able to point it out, going through tape or something. Hey, that's my first read, that's my second, that's my third. But to go out there and do it, and then do it in real time, and still be able to sort of have the technique to deliver the football, I think is just so impressive. And I think that's something NFL teams are going to love about what Rattler's done this year. And, I watch games on Sunday, and some of the quarterbacks, some of these teams are trotting out there. And I know some of them are in backup situations because of a guy got hurt or something. Well, Mike even had Field Yates on podcast last week. He sort of put Spencer into that box as like, hey, this guy could stick in the NFL as a backup quarterback. I think teams are going to see quite a bit more upside than that with Spencer Rattler. Now, Field Yates knows far more than I do about the NFL draft side of things, but we've watched every snap Spencer Rattler has played here at South Carolina, and the level in which he executes, like the percentage of times that he executes this year, is just absolutely off the charts.
Well, and I think that something that stood out about the the Vanderbilt game is he had time, no sacks, just I think 4 pressures on almost 40 passing attempts. Those are great numbers. Now, you can't expect that to continue against Kentucky. Looking at Kentucky, they're not thrilled about their pass rush right now. They feel like they've been inconsistent there. I think this team is in the top 50 nationally in sacks. They have 23 on the year defensively.
That's on the lower end of the SEC, though.
Lower end of the SEC. And so that's, of course, the key to this game. Spencer Rattler has been pretty good under pressure, whether it's been able to escape, been able to make plays. But what we've seen this year is that when he does have time, when he has a clean pocket, he's hard to beat. I mean, he's been picking teams apart, and that's what we saw against Vandy. I mean, aside from those drops, I think you pointed out, Wes, what do you have, 2 missed passes? One was the interception where he kind of had a guy in his face. He short-armed a ball to Xavier Legette. Still a great decision. Just short-armed it a little bit in those conditions. He picked Vandy apart. So if he can get time in this game, we know Kentucky's going to play that zone defense. So that's a little different than I think they've seen. Kentucky will play more zone than South Carolina is probably accustomed to seeing. Can he pick this Kentucky secondary apart? And I think it's possible, but again, the key is, does he get that time? I mean, South Carolina's played some of the best teams in the country in terms of rushing the passer. Texas A&M is first in the country in sacks. Tennessee's in the top 10. Missouri is in the top 20 and on and on. They played a lot of teams that are really good at pressuring the quarterback, and that's shown at times. Tennessee, UNC, we saw that from game one on. So that, to me, is kind of a key in this one is, can this offensive line, can they start for a third week in a row, the same guys out there? Will that stability help you? Because this is probably going to have to be even more of a Spencer Rattler carries you game, given the running back situation, I would think.
Yeah, well, and I think that goes back to what we were talking about earlier. You have a lack of depth right now at running back, but you have your guy. So I think the curious thing to see will be how much do they try to, kind of roll with Mario Anderson. How much do they ride him? And I think, this is a Kentucky defense that I don't think I have a feel for what the matchup looks like for South Carolina. What I mean by that is, what should the expectation be? Like, I think this is a pretty good Kentucky defense. If you look at some of the teams they've played lately, other than Mississippi State, they've given up some points lately. Now, there's been, I know the Alabama game, turnovers were heavily involved, at least from the Kentucky side of things, in terms of putting their defense in some bad spots there, and so that factors in as well. But is there going to be room to run against this front? They just physically look like a big front to me, and so can South Carolina get some movement? Can they get anything going in the running game? I thought they'd have been able to run the ball a little bit better the last 2 weeks, given the matchups there. So. I think it's going to be fascinating. I think there will be some ugly moments from the offense against Kentucky, because without them being a team that's just going to go out there and play man coverage with you, it does limit some of the opportunities for explosive plays. Like, Kentucky's entire thing is keep everything in front. And so if you take away all those deep balls, what's left on offense? So that to me is a huge key. Can South Carolina execute well enough to drive down the field?
And they've done a pretty good job at keeping things in front of them. I know, listen to some of the podcasts that cover Kentucky football. They do have concerns with what's going on with their secondary, particularly when it comes to safeties, but they have been fourth in the SEC against explosive plays this year. So that's something, again, they've actually done a pretty good job at limiting, which, of course, something that South Carolina has been good at this season themselves. So that's going to be an interesting matchup to see play out on Saturday.
Yeah, I think that's schematically what they do. That's what they're built around.
Well, and if you go back and listen to Mark Stoops' comments from his Monday press conference, that was the bulk of what he talked about. I mean, his entire description. He talked fondly about Spencer Rattler and Xavier Legette, but he said this is an explosive offense. They can make They make a lot of explosive plays. He really harped on it, and so that's their identity, like you said, Wes. They're really, I think, going to double down on that in this game. And so for South Carolina, can you take what they give you, and then can you drive the football? And when you get in the red zone, I have a feeling that red zone play will be important in this one. We've seen that in this Kentucky series. We've seen South Carolina get the ball in plus territory through turnovers or just drive it down there and then bog down. Can you get down there and finish, and can you score, but can you score touchdowns?
Yeah, and Kentucky is 10th in the SEC as far as allowing points in the red zone, allowing opponents to score a little over 89% of the time. And South Carolina, not the best when it comes to red zones, only been able to score 80% of the time. That's Kentucky's red zone percentage there. But so that's going to be another interesting matchup to watch play out on Saturday as well.
Do you know what South Carolina's been in the red zone as far as statistically? I feel like they've been pretty good down there, honestly. So this is a team, I'll tell you the eye test of it. I don't know if the numbers back it up. I'm guessing they probably do. This is a team that does not necessarily execute at a high percentage in the number of times they get down there, but when they do get down there, they typically this year have scored points. So I think their red zone percentage is probably pretty good.
Yeah, South Carolina's 88% in the red zone, 65% of those being touchdowns. So yeah, and that's right in the middle of the SEC at 7. So pretty good there.
Yeah, they've been solid. I think you look at our guy Fleming, the Stat of War Twitter, and some fascinating things from him. But he has that thing called an equal rate, which I kind of hate the name because nobody knows what that means. But what it really means is the percentage of times that you have a positive drive, basically. And he has a specific, I think for him it's basically, do you get inside the 40-yard line on a drive? And South Carolina is very, very bad on their percentage of having those drives. But also their ratio when they do have those drives of actually scoring is really, really good. So some of that is because of how reliant they have been on big explosive plays.
We certainly hope South Carolina can carry the momentum of the offensive performance last week into the game this weekend against Kentucky. Speaking of momentum, turnovers finally started getting some the past couple weeks. Can they carry that momentum over into Kentucky as well? We'll hear from Clayton White and what he had to say about that next. You're listening to
Former Navy SEAL Sean Ryan shares real stories from real people from all walks of life on The Sean Ryan Show.
Tennessee Congressman Tim Burchett.
Where do the majority of UAP sightings happen?
Yeah, military installations, but I couch that. I mean, if they're going to fly here and check something out, they're going to see where our best and brightest are, I would assume. They asked me about seeing any UFOs in Washington, D.C., and I said, no. I said, there's no intelligent life around here.
The Sean Ryan Show on YouTube or wherever you listen.
Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs at Gold Line Framing in West Columbia, going until noon here on the game.
Always is. Winning the turnover battle as a football team is definitely one of our top 5 things that we discuss every single day. We have to go after the ball, understanding that Kentucky doesn't run a ton of plays. You might not have that many opportunities, so you have to be where you're supposed to be, when you're supposed to be there, and do it violent and make sure we're all on the same page. And, if turnovers don't just fall in your lap, you create them. You have turnovers on downs, you have takeaways. So in the defensive room, we count turnovers on downs as turnovers. We don't count them as takeaways. So we want more takeaways, and we got to do a great job of getting to the ball. Tips and overthrows, we got to get those. And if the ball does bounce our way, we got to take advantage of it.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler, West, and Chris out at Gold Line Framing in West Columbia, 511 12th Street, going for about 40 more minutes, going until noon. That, of course, was the voice of Clayton White, defensive coordinator for the Gamecocks yesterday, talking about the momentum that they've had with turnovers over these past couple weeks. Through the first, 8 games of the season, they only had 7 turnovers, takeaways, including none in the previous 3 games for taking on Jacksonville State. And then you've been able to pop with 6 over the course of these past 8 quarters, which is obviously huge and something that you can hopefully keep going this weekend against Kentucky. But he brought up an interesting point there. Kentucky, the slowest paced offense in the entire FBS, as they only average about 56 plays per game. So having less opportunities to create those takeaways for South Carolina this weekend, more likely than not.
Well, one thing that you look at is, I'm not going to win any sort of award by pointing this out, but if you play an overmatched team, a team that you're just simply better than, the odds of you getting those takeaways obviously go up a lot. And when you play teams that are that you are overmatched against, you need those takeaways that are normally tougher to get in order to pull an upset. And so, South Carolina plays Jacksonville State. That ended up being more evenly matched than I think anybody wanted in that stadium, or any of the staff, any of the players and fans. But turnovers were, an important part of that game. You play Vanderbilt, the conditions are poor. We saw Vandy bounce a snap back, and South Carolina was able to capitalize by blocking the punt and then returning for a touchdown. We saw, fumbles in that game, so ball security was tough. So the conditions, but also I think just the caliber of the opponent and the situations you put them in. So now you play Kentucky, and then you go play Clemson, and we're getting ahead of ourselves by looking at Clemson, but they've had plenty of turnover woes this year. In fact, according to Dabo Swinney, they'd be undefeated if they did not have as many turnovers apparently this season.
Sure.
But joking aside, it has been a better showing from the defense. Just overall, like that game against Vanderbilt was the most complete game they've played all year, the most complete game they've played in a while. I don't anticipate a performance like that against Kentucky or Clemson, but they do need to play like that. Right? I think that defensive performance, whether you look at the takeaways, the ability to get off the field on third down, how they affected the quarterback stopping the run, they just did everything well in that game. Now your competition level goes up but you're going to have to carry over that type of performance to build confidence. They just look like a much more cohesive and confident unit in that game, and they got to carry that over.
Well, so we've seen in the last 3 weeks now, at least, counting this coming week, we will have seen the fastest offense in the country, or top two, right up there with Tennessee and Jacksonville State. We obviously saw South Carolina play Tennessee early this year. And now the slowest offense in Kentucky, which, I think is one of the most interesting things about college football is you're going to see all these different diverse ways of doing things that you don't necessarily see from week to week in the NFL. If y'all are running an offense, what do y'all think is the best way to go about it? The Kentucky way or the Jacksonville State way?
Well, you can have success doing both. I think it's up to your own, kind of personal philosophy. I don't know, if I were doing things, I would lean more towards tempo, but you can, again, still be very successful with a slow, methodic, as long as you're gaining yards, a slow, methodic, plotting offense as well.
I think the difficult part with offenses like that is they're so momentum based, and if you're not having success, you really put yourself in bad spots. Yeah. I think I really like the offenses that have it as part of their plan, but aren't just complete. Jacksonville State, their entire identity was based around tempo. I feel like, and that just feels very 5 years ago to me. So I think you better, though, in today's college football, you better either have some tempo or you better have pre-snap shifts that can give you lots of information about what your opponent's doing, and B, help you with creating matchups, I think.
Yeah, I think if you look, first of all, it's very jarring to go look at the top scoring offenses in the country and have to keep scrolling, and Tennessee's tied with Georgia Tech for the 35th best scoring offense in the country. Part of that was, they got Missouri just pretty much shut them down, right? So that's a big part of it. But Oregon actually number one, by the way, 46.3 points a game. But if you go through the top 10, there's not an offense in there that you could describe as plotting other than Michigan. Mm-hmm. Right? Michigan can line up and run the ball
32 times in
30 times in a row. But the other ones are Oregon, LSU, Lincoln Riley at Southern Cal, Jeff Levy, Oklahoma, Washington with Kalen DeBoer, Georgia, which is not, you don't think of them as a tempo team, but they'll use it. And they're not just a ground and pound team. They throw the football. They're a balanced team. SMU, North Carolina, right? There's a lot. There's not many teams in here that their goal was to line up and say, "Oh, we'd love to run 50 plays." You don't really see that in the top teams.
I will say this: Kentucky's, outside of the win against Mississippi State, their most recent best performance in this losing skid they've been on was against Tennessee and losing that game by 6 points. They did incorporate a little bit of tempo into that game. Devin Leary actually had his best game of the season against Tennessee and benefited from playing that tempo as well. So that's something that we could see them mix in a little bit. It's just not what their MO on offense is.
And maybe not a coincidence that Devin Leary got comfortable and confident in that game, potentially because they went with a little bit different, a little bit faster pace. I do think the interesting thing, too, about college football is it sounds almost counterproductive to even ask, but most of those teams are tempo teams. And is the point is that are you the best offense because you score the most points? Like how many of those teams also consistently put their defenses right back on the field and in bad spots as well? I would say if you could let me pick, give me the Michigan offense and give me the Georgia offense, because they're scoring those points while also being more of they're probably, especially Georgia's probably like middle of the pack, I would think, in terms of tempo. Like they're not a super slow team, but they're not going to go out there and just sprint to the line of scrimmage either. I mean, the Jacksonville State guys, man, it's almost funny if you watch how quickly all of their guys have been coached up. As soon as they're tackled, they're like throwing 15-yard spirals to the referee and sprinting to get lined up. And so it is interesting. But I like Liam Cohen for Kentucky. I know they've kind of been up and down on offense this year. I think he's a great mind, man.
So to answer your question, Georgia is actually 55th in the nation at 70 plays per game. So right around that middle ground area. But you also have to account late in the game when they're just blowing people out and, just bleeding the clock and running the ball. That also factors into that too. Speaking of, defense, slowing teams down, Ray Davis is going to be obviously a matchup issue this weekend. Former South Carolina fullback Pat DeMarco on with Bill yesterday gave a very detailed breakdown of the 3-3-5 versus a guy like Ray Davis. Let you guys listen to that. I'll react to that coming up. You're listening to Gamecock Central Takeover Hour live out at Gold Line Framing in West Columbia, going until noon here on the game. Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler, West, and Chris along with you for a few more minutes as we're out at Gold Line Framing, 511 12th Street in West Columbia, going until noon. Of course, again, we'll be out at Firehouse Subs on Main Street come Monday. Speaking of Firehouse Subs, we always appreciate you guys weighing in on the Firehouse Subs text line, 803-404-6100. Chad asks on the text line, my largest concern is can we contain and be physical enough defensively to stop the run? Going to be a long day if we can. Obviously, South Carolina has had some issues stopping the run over the course of the season and even the games where they have, on paper, been able to stop the run. That ended up being a pretty long day for the secondary as far as the other team throwing the ball goes. But yesterday, so Pat DeMarco, who's a former South Carolina fullback, usually comes in about once a week, hangs out with Bill. He gets his thoughts on the latest game and what's going on, with South Carolina. And obviously the 3-3-5 defense is something that they've been implementing more and more. It was their base defense against Vanderbilt. We saw Ben Martin Scott have a really big day out there. And Bill asked him the question yesterday, how that kind of defense can fare against a running back like Ray Davis this upcoming weekend. Here's what Pat DeMarco had to say yesterday.
Yeah, welcome to Talkville, the ultimate Smallville rewatch podcast. I always drove the cars, the Porsche, Ferrari, Lamborghinis. They were always a little skeptical, but sometimes they go, all right, Rosie, just go up where the stop sign is and turn the car around, and we'll give you your cue on the walkie. And I go, great. And they're like, Rosie? I'm like, yeah, dude. Oh, yeah, this stop sign? They're like, yes, there's only that stop. Oh, okay.
Jump in now or catch up on any of the past seasons of Talkville on YouTube or wherever you listen.
They're going to, I would say our defensive staff's going to do a lot of studying and breaking down. Are they trying to attack the edges, or are they trying to penetrate you in the middle? Are they trying to run tight zone? Are they trying to run wide zone? Are they trying to run duo where they get a bunch of double teams? So, the one thing that a 3-3-5 defense kind of where you can get attacked is you have soft edges. So 3-3-5, you got to think you get edged with a tight end on the end of the line unless you put a backer, walk a backer up on the outside. Because you usually have either a 4-eye or a 5 technique, or those instead of a 3 technique and a shade. You can just get attacked on the edges. When I was playing in Atlanta with Kyle Shanahan, like if a team ever ran an odd front, which was a head-up nose, a 4-eye, and a stand-up linebacker, we had a different playbook that we had in for those guys. We would try to attack the edges because that stand-up edge guy, he's a wide guy, and he is basically saying, I'm not letting anything outside, so you can throw your hat and you can try to reach him, and you can put him in panic mode, so you can really soften up the edge there. So depending on what Kentucky, what their plan of attack is for us, I could see us adjusting back to 4-2-5 and putting a Tyreek and another big guy in there to anchor up front. But honestly, that 3-3-5 and having Bam there and all the movement in the games we were doing up front, it was, it put Kentucky, kind of put them in a little bit of a bind, just trying to sort everything out. So I think you'll see a blend of both. I think there will be a transition point where they'll probably bounce back and forth from the 3-3-5 to 4-2-5, and keep Kentucky on their toes.
And that's a very good breakdown right there, again, of how 3-3-5 defense could factor against Kentucky this weekend. And we don't necessarily know if that's going to be the main form of defense they're going to be using, or if they bounce back between that and 4-2-5 like we've seen over these past couple weeks. But he does bring up a good point there. And obviously Ray Davis, with his speed, has the ability to get outside on the edges and really make you pay. That's something you certainly have to watch out for this weekend if you decide to bring that kind of front against them.
Yeah, it's going to be, it's kind of a game within a game, right, to think about this, because as Pat was breaking down there, you're trying to project what Kentucky's game plan offensively is going to be, and so you go back and you look at what they've done this season. You go back and look at, what has Liam Cohen done throughout his career, whether it's been his two stints at Kentucky, other concepts that he had with the Rams. Generally, coaches are going to, butter their bread somewhere. You don't expect Kentucky to come out with a completely different run scheme. They may add some things, they may tweak some things, they may take some things out, but you're going to structure your defensive game plan around what you think you're going to get from them. Now, what we don't know, Tyler, is what is the plan for South Carolina? I certainly anticipate we are going to see the 3-3-5 this week that was unveiled a couple weeks ago. How much of it do we see? You also got so that's pregame, but then you've got the in-game adjustment. Okay, what are you actually getting in-game from the opposing offense? What's working? What's not? The thing that you would love to have happen, just as a general point, is make Devin Leary beat you. Get this team into third down, whip Williams-Brice into a frenzy, and then you can unleash that 3-3-5 that has helped you get to the quarterback more. It was a big issue for this defense before, say, the Texas A&M game. They were having a lot of trouble getting to the quarterback. They still haven't been phenomenal there, but since they have put in this package, they have had some spots of success because you're getting your best athletes on the field, and in that 3-3-5 package, you got Bam Martin-Scott on the field, you got Jaron Willis on the field. That has helped them. That's given them more pass rush juice, and that's what you want here.
And this offensive front that Kentucky brings to the table, one of the better ones in the SEC in terms of sacks allowed, only giving up 16 on the season and only giving up around 5 tackles for losses a game, which is good for 5th in the SEC. So it's definitely going to be one of the stronger fronts as opposed to what you had this past weekend against Vanderbilt. So again, that kind of maybe changes the way you look at it. And again, the ability to run the ball with a special running back like Ray Davis, they could certainly make you pay in a lot of respects with that on offense.
Well, here's something that Wes and I were discussing yesterday. A couple points on not Kentucky's pass protection, but in their run game. They actually are one of the lower graded. You mentioned how well they've done pass protecting. On the flip side, they have not been great in the run blocking department, which you look at, it seems kind of backwards.
Right. But Ray Davis, very good at breaking tackles.
Ray Davis, very good at breaking tackles. And so what you don't want is the intersection of those two things where they're stacked up on each other, where, Kentucky's blocking very well and creating a lot of room, and Ray Davis is now at the second level breaking tackles. He's going to break some tackles behind the line of scrimmage, at the line of scrimmage.
Right.
I don't want to say you can live with that, but there's a big difference between that and then breaking tackles once he's at the second level at the linebackers, or even worse, back in the secondary.
Would you believe that Kentucky's lowest rated run blocking game was the Florida game, according to Pro Football Focus?
Well, I guess I could see that because Ray Davis
he did break a lot of tackles that day.
He broke a lot of tackles in that game. He was absolutely fantastic in that game. But we were actually looking back at how many tackles he forced in that game. I can't even.
Oh, it was like 10 or 11, right? It was
might have
pretty
been 12.
high number.
I mean, it was double digits. So he's been really good. But here's the other thing I was going to point out. And Wes and I were talking about this yesterday. If you listen to Clayton White, he wasn't exactly putting Ray Davis on a pedestal.
Sure.
Now, he was not discounting him as a player at all, but he kind of made a point to say, hey, this is another good SEC back. We see a lot of good SEC backs. And if you go look up and down, you can kind of get lost in Ray Davis's game against Florida.
Sure.
It was a little bit more of an outlier. It was a tremendous great performance by him. But other than that, I think he has 2 other 100-yard games this season, and it hasn't been like he's absolutely torn it up. Now, I think a big part of that, as we were discussing, is the fact that Kentucky has not blocked the run extremely well. He's certainly more than capable of doing it. I think Clayton White was kind of speaking to the fact that, hey, we have played a bunch of other good backs. You go up and down the list, they have. And in almost every game this year, and trying to also, I think, build some confidence in his guys of, hey, let's not put this guy on a pedestal because we played other good backs this year.
Right. And, yeah, they've definitely played a higher caliber of defense these past couple weeks. When you talk about Georgia, Missouri, Tennessee, Mississippi State, is a little bit farther down on that list. But Alabama this past weekend, so, yeah, his numbers certainly dwindled quite a bit compared to what he was doing at the beginning of the season against Ball State, Akron, Eastern Kentucky, and stuff like that. But, again, South Carolina has had trouble stopping the run a lot this season, so it wouldn't be shocking if he went out there and had a great game on Saturday.
Yeah, and I'll add, hearing from Pat DeMarco a second ago, when Pat talks, I listen.
Oh, my goodness.
For one,
he's a professor.
Yeah, for one, he's outstanding. Two, his big subject last week was how Bam Martin-Scott, he wants to see him play more, and then he has his breakout games. I don't know if he had a tip there that Bam was going to play more, or if he was just looking at, he just had that thought himself.
Right.
But here we are, and obviously, like we talked about, Bam has been really good in that new role for himself.
If you wonder how smart guys that play in the NFL are, just listen to Pat DeMarco when he talks with Bill, and you're like, wow, everybody in the NFL has to be this level of smart to play at that level.
Smart and the level of athleticism.
Oh, yeah.
And Pat has gone the direction we always talk. So the big guys, the big men, especially offensive linemen.
Right.
Well, I don't have time to tell the story.
You know what? We can tell the story on the other side. How about that? We'll do that. We'll wrap.
Tyler's giving me we'll wrap it up.
We'll wrap up today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs at Gold Line Framing in West Columbia, here on the game. Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler, West, and Chris broadcasting live. Gold Line Framing in West Columbia for a few more minutes here, going until noon. Then we'll throw things over to Terry, who's out at the Nest for today's edition of the halftime show. We had to run into a break there, so sorry to rudely interrupt West in the middle of this story, but we will let you continue with your thought from a moment ago.
Tyler, when Tyler's ready for you to wrap up, he's like,
it's done.
Gives you the look.
We have rules.
He's like, shut up, Wes. You're talking too much again. I do want to give a shout out to our friend Bill, who just dropped by. Loyal supporter, I feel like.
Come by and see us a few times.
Yep, of both the show here and GamecockCentral.com. So appreciate you, Bill. Hopefully you're back in the car now and are hearing your shout out, but always good to see you. But man, DeMarco, so all the big guys, and normally it's offensive linemen, when they get out of ball, they go two ways. Some of them, we won't talk about that, but some of them just, they get really fit.
Yeah,
and Pat is super fit. TJ Johnson, by the way, was in town for the Spurrier Days thing. Super fit now. He went the fit direction.
I didn't get to see TJ. I'm intrigued now.
I almost didn't recognize him. So
it's always funny to me, like offensive linemen specifically. I know, like you've seen a picture of like the Pouncey brothers now. They're like little sticks compared to what they were when they were playing in Pittsburgh and playing at Florida as well. Like the transformation some of those guys have as soon as they finish playing, because of course having to bulk and carry all that weight for the position. Like some of them immediately slip down. It's the craziest thing.
Well, and the kind of unspoken scary part of that is you kind of realize, hey, maybe it's not that good to have to be that big to be able to compete, which you have to be, at this level. But the actual story, so Pat ran the Gamecock 5K. Can't remember what they call it, the one that was the day of the spring game.
Okay.
Cocky truck?
Yes. The one we tried to get Bill to run.
Yes. And he was flying. I mean, I don't know if he finished first. He may have. And I'm like, You don't really realize how athletic you have to be.
Who says fullbacks are slow?
To play in the NFL. It's a fullback tight end, and he is just, he was gone. So, anyway, I'm just trying to say I got a ton of respect for Pat DeMarco, and I could listen to him talk football for hours.
When he comes in and talks with Bill, I think it's usually on like Wednesday mornings. It's really good, really insightful, and a good breakdown that you kind of have to take notes as you're going along, or you're going to get lost somewhere in the middle, because he goes completely in depth on it. You can just see the football mechanisms working within his mind when he's talking about it. Really neat to hear.
Love that stuff. What did he say about the game this week? Does he have the Gamecocks?
Figured he would, as we try and be positive about it, right? Like if it's just an unfavorable matchup, we're honest. But I think most of us feel like this is an opportunity, and the ESPN FPI still has South Carolina favored in this game. Like, as long as they go out there and handle their business, they should be able to win. It could be close, but I don't think it's gonna be a blowout like last week. Yeah, and I think should be able to win is probably the best way to say it. I would stop short of saying they should win. I think this is such a tight football game. Like, I don't necessarily think this is a game where you sit there and say, you were talking earlier, Chris, when you're outmatched, you sit there and say, well, you have to win the turnover battle. I think this is a game you can't lose the turnover battle, but if it just is an evenly played game where neither side is turning the ball over or the turnovers are equal, it probably does, something you brought up earlier, it probably comes down to red zone, man. Like, who's kicking field goals, who's scoring touchdowns. The game a couple of years ago in Columbia when these two teams faced, I mean, it was an old-school SEC defensive battle. And Carolina had the ball several times in plus territory where they took over in great field position and were not able to score. Beamer brings that game up from time to time, talking about whether you go for it on fourth down or not. And they were very aggressive in that game, but didn't get a couple of those fourth downs. And so, I think both sides probably internally go into this game feeling like they're going to go win, which means from the outside looking in, you're talking about two pretty relatively closely matched football teams.
Yeah, the latest line on this game is what? Close to a pick'em. There's like a couple points, I think, at one point at the last check. And so, yeah, I think that's what everybody's anticipating. Tight game. Both sides probably picking their own team, right? Kentucky people probably think they should/will win this game. South Carolina people probably, think should/will, or maybe at the very minimum, cautiously optimistic about this game.
Sure. Last check of the line, it has Kentucky favored by 1.5. That is per ESPN.
Which is not even... I mean,
it's essentially a pick'em.
Yeah, essentially. By the way, we were hoping to have this today. I think we're going to have somebody from KSR.
Okay.
I'm waiting on the final confirmation on time, but I think during our 11 o'clock hour tomorrow, we're going to have Adam Luckett from KSR. They are in the process of they'll be driving at the time, coming down to Columbia, but I think we'll have that.
I've listened to some of their stuff this week. They don't seem to like Beamer too much.
Yeah. They, this may not be a rivalry, but it's borderline.
They make it sound like it is. I'll say that much.
Yeah, there are a couple fan bases that, for some reason, seem extremely bothered by Shane Beamer, and Kentucky's one, Tennessee's the other one.
Yeah,
Tennessee. I guess they're bothered by everybody.
I guess so. That'll do it for today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. Thank you to everyone here at Goldline Framing in West Columbia for allowing us to be out here. We'll be back in studio tomorrow. We'll have buy or sell. We'll get you set for South Carolina and Kentucky coming up on Saturday. Halftime show with Terry out at the Nest in Columbia coming up next here on the game.
All right, guys, what's up? Show is over. We got to tell you about one more awesome, great sponsor. It's our friends over at Integrated Media, integratedmediainc.com. Hit them up right now, 803-948-8327. Guess what? I know football season for college ball is almost over. We still got NFL. We got basketball season rolling. Upgrade the man cave today. They can do anything and everything you could imagine. That could be a brand new TV. That could be surround sound. Have them come out and do what they did for me. They upgraded the whole home Wi-Fi. We ran Ethernet throughout the house, to the office, to the other office, and just got us all hooked up. So whatever you can imagine involving audio, visual at your house, maybe you want to make your home smarter with smart home aspects, they can do that too. External speakers when you're outside sitting around the fire, they can do that too. Anything and everything you can imagine, our friends at Integrated Media are going to do it for you. Again, integratedmediainc.com. Hit them up today.
For decades, Rolling Stone has set the bar for entertainment publications. Today, Rolling Stone Music Now takes over in podcast form.
We have Michael Azerrad, who was Nirvana's very first biographer. I'm not sure how many people realize how many of the best songs on In Utero were written way beforehand.
To be fair to Kurt, he was also a new father. There was a lot of stuff distracting him. It wasn't just drugs, although that was certainly a major factor.
Rolling Stone Music Now, wherever you listen.